I don't know. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Can we?
Yeah. So I'm looking.
Can we talk afterwards for a minute
Suresh,
about it?
Yeah. So there was an email from, but it was in January. This is the one you're asking about?
No, but like you published a new rev. Did he respond to it?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so I need to track him down. So that's the last thing holding 3315 days up. So
Okay.
I'll just follow it up. Okay.
So what, we're missing something?
Act from him. That's what everything's waiting for.
Okay.
For it to go through.
All right.
So just to let you know, like in case you want to know what status. So I'll track him down. Okay.
Okay. I hate people that give these slides last minute.
Okay, this is ours.
Well, they're getting what they're getting. Hopefully this works. Oh, it's showing wrong. I'll have to mirror this. Where's the displays? Where the hell's the mirroring thing? Mirror displays.
Bernie doesn't showing. Bernie doesn't show here.
Did they? It looks like this is off. It's showing there. It just isn't showing up there.
Yeah, it's.
Okay.
So we lost the pen. So
I got it. Good afternoon and welcome to the DHC Working Group meeting. Everybody should note the note well if you haven't noted already. The blue sheets are going around. If somebody was willing to be a Etherpad note taker, that'd be great. Anybody? Okay. And I'm Bernie Volz, one of the co-chairs.
And I'm Tomek Mrugalski. Hello.
Okay, so we've got 4 things. The first one we're into, the administrivia. We've got DHCP v4 over DHCP v6 source address option, the Yang model, and then some new potential work, the link layer assignment mechanism for DHCP v6. Anybody have any agenda bashing they need to do, or is everybody okay with that order? All right. Just wanted to update people that we did get the recharter approved. Thank you, Suresh, and the ISG for that. We also have updated our milestones, and so we have a few things that we would like to potentially get in for this month if we still can, but maybe it won't happen. There are a few drafts that are probably in question there, the force renew and the bootstrap options. but maybe we are ready to send the DHCP v4/6 address assignment option on. And hopefully we will be able to get the 3315 biz work into the RC editor queue. Suresh is working on that, and I think we just got one more comment that needs clarification or to be approved, and then we're ready to go. The review that was done during the IETF last call, there were some director reviews. There were also the IESG reviews, ended up with about 140 comments. There's a lot of comments, but some of them were like, there's one that it could have just been one comment, but it ended up being like 30 comments. Okay. So we did the update to that. Most of them were minor. A lot were just typos. We're like cleaning up references and things like that. One major change was suggested, which was to reduce the hop limit count, which is how many relays you can chain together, from 32 to 8. The 32, especially if you got 32 going one way, 32 going the other way, somebody thought that was kind of ridiculous, and there could be some latency issues and other things. So, and I don't think relay chaining is, most sites probably only do one relay. I don't know of many that do more than one. We also had cleaned up some IANA actions, and we improved the terminology definitions and the consistency of use. So they were all good comments. It was just a little tedious going through all 140. So we do want to get it to the RC editor as soon as we can, and as Suresh says, it will go.
Yeah, so Suresh Krishnan. So I think it's like just minor things, like just some checks and get it on. And I really want to thank you guys for like doing the spreadsheet for tracking this. So I don't know if like it's like visible to everybody, but it's like, I think you posted on the list, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And I think it was like really, really helpful, because without that, it's going to have taken like much longer of like, stuff over email. So thank you very much for doing the tracking.
Sure.
And I mean, we could have used the GitHub issues tracker or, the IETF tracker, but those tend to be a little bit heavier maintenance work than just doing it with a spreadsheet. So at least that's what I thought.
Yes, and it was super useful for us as well. So
yeah. All right, just an update on the working group status. We did publish one RFC during this time. Well, the RFC editor did, and that is the generalized UDP source port for DHCP relays. We hopefully will get one approved for publication, and there are two working groups that are currently active that are both on the agenda. One working group document recently expired, which isn't on the agenda, which is the bootstrap options. And the author of that document has changed employment, and he may revisit the work in the future, but for now, unless somebody else is strongly interested in taking it on, it'll probably be put aside and just be a dormant working group document to be awoken at some point in the future. But if anybody is really interested in pursuing that work, they can certainly, talk to us and the author about maybe taking over that work to get it out. There are three related drafts. One is on the agenda, which is the Mac assign one. The two others are not. There's actually now a fourth document that is in the related sections, but that won't be presented today, maybe in Montreal. We'll see.
Okay, and a quick hackathon update. So, as you know, there was a hackathon over the Saturday and Sunday. This time, so Bernie, next slide. This time we had two projects. The first one, we thought that we will try to implement the server model that is specified in the draft that we have as a working group item. We made a lot of progress. There was some sharp edges. We reported a couple of issues. They are in the issue tracker, so I will be talking about them briefly when we get to the Young model discussion. But the overall perception is that it was reasonably good. So we wrote some code It's not yet functional, but well, it's somewhat functional, not usable yet, but we managed to extract some of the information. And the other project that's been happening was that there was a first implementation of the 3215Bs started from scratch. It was for a Riot system. This is for embedded devices. And I was told that the implementation currently, the size of the binary is 3 kilobytes. So it's a good result, yes. So, and the code is submitted as pull requests to RiotOS. Okay, so that's it.
Okay. Please remember to stand in the pink box. Yeah, you may have to turn it on.
Yeah. Okay, hello everyone, and this is for the DHCP 4/6 source address option. And we have just posted the latest version on the data tracker, so you guys could just find it on the website. Okay, next slide, please. Something about the document status. It is currently an active working group document, and it tends to update the RFC 7598 if approved. And actually about this draft's lifetime, the first presentation is maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but whatever, we just get the draft back. So we have done some major updates since the working group adoption. And here are 6 for Bernie's review and comments. Okay, next slide. Well, I will just give a very quick overview of this document. So the motivation is that the current software provisioning model is deterministic. For example, the IPv6 source address have to use some predetermined prefix, and the CE is IPv4 or IPv6, and IPv6 lists have to be bound together. So the conclusion is that it is very limited. So in this document, we just use the DHCP 4/6 transport defining RFC 7341. And the detailed process is a very typical two-way communication. The client will just request the server, the DHCP 4/6 server is IPv4 and IPv6 configuration. It includes the IPv4 address, the BR's IPv6 address, and also the IPv6 binding prefix hint, which is optional. And then the client will just communicate the IPv6 source address back to the DHCP 4/6 server. And this mechanism is applied to the both Lightwave 4/6 and MAP-E. So next slide. So to fulfill the process, we have to update and define new options. The option that we have to update is the option S46BR. Because in the original RFC, it has been defined that it should be used with specific software container options. So in this document, we just remove this restriction, so it could appear directly in the process. And we also need a new DHCP v6 option to carry the preferred prefix hint for the client to bind. This is very useful if there are lots of multiple prefix for the CEs to bind. And also this is optional. And we have a DHCP v4 option to let the client to inform the server of its IPv6 source address option, a source address. So the server could just add a new entry for this tunnel. Well, next. So here are some major updates. The first thing we have done is that we add very detailed text to describe the client and server behaviors, include the initialization, the rebind and renew, and also the release. And we also cover the unexpected scenarios. For example, when the client just received the DHCP NNK from the server, or the server just found a mismatch of the source address. And we also discussed the change of the IPv6 source address. How we do is that the client will send a DHCP request with the new defined option, and the server on the server side it will implement a minimal time interval. And also we have made a big change here is that we changed the source address option from a DHCP v6 option to DHCP v4 option. And this has to thanks to Ian, to Deutsche Telekom. They have do some implementations and found that if we just use a DHCP v6 option, it's very complicated. So we just make this change. Well, next slide. Well, here's the outstanding issues. We want a new title. Here is the currently we just call this draft DHCP v4 over DHCP v6 source address option. This is because it's a legacy from the initial version. We just use this a single source address option to carry 3 different kinds of information. But currently we have 2 new options and 1 updated option. And the draft defines a whole provisioning process, not just the options. So our co-authors think that a better title is required. And here is what we propose to as the new title. It's called the dynamic soft while provisioning using DHCP v4 over DHCP v6. And so I'm just here to ask the working group, are there any comments on this new title? So if we are happy with this, we could just make the change in the next version. Cool.
Well,
Okay.
well, one question would be, so there's also, I guess, the static provisioning. Is that why? It's just, there's the dynamic part, and I guess because it's DHC, you want to that's where the dynamic part comes from. I'm just wondering why the dynamic word is there.
Right, it's a little bit confusing. Yeah, right. The dynamic, it means the software provisioning, not the DHC itself.
So
So-
it's dynamic. Yeah, but what other software? Is there other software provisioning that's not dynamic? I guess is my question.
Yes, we have that. It could go to the.
Yeah, Ian Farrer. So I think the first couple of paragraphs or something in the introduction make the point about the RFC 7598
Yeah, maybe I'll
static
go back
pre-provisioning
and read
options and how this differentiates, the differences between this that mechanism and this mechanism. So I do take your point about the double dynamic, or 3 dynamics in there if you count all of them. So maybe we could come up with a better word instead of dynamic. I guess the wider question is, do we agree in principle that the existing title is not really descriptive of what the draft contains now?
Yeah, I think you ended up with a lot more in there than just sort of your normal options definition document. So I
there's
think
extensions to
there's a
server
good
behavior
argument
and-
for making this change. It's just, I think let's take it to the working group list, mailing list, to see, what, and that way people have a little bit more time to, think about it and
Fair enough.
consider it.
Yep.
Okay. So next slide.
Can I borrow your powers?
For the next steps, actually we have proof of concept implementations by Deutsche Telekom. The client is based on the OpenWRT and the server is the Kia. And Ian just told me that this will be published as soon as possible. And the learnings from those implementations has been incorporated into the latest version. So we think it is ready for the working group last call. So any comments?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is just get the title clarified, send that out to the list, and we'll discuss it a little bit, and then we should be able to do the working group last call, I think, on it.
Got it, cool.
Anybody else have comments? All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, actually, I wrote some notes down. Come on up, but about the draft, and that is that in the 3315 biz, we have a new table 4 that we're going to ask IANA to do, which says, for example, whether an option should be in the ORO and whether it's a unitary or not option. Okay, so I think one of the things that you should update the draft to say is to update that table based on 3315 biz, so reference 3315 biz table 4 and direct IANA to change those entries, because you got to change option 90 to now be available in the ORO, and you should add the definitions for your 2 new options to tell IANA what to put in the table for those entries. Okay. So that's, I can send a note out to the mailing list, but I think we should, that should be done just so that it's ready when 3315 biz goes through.
Hello, everyone. I'm Zihao from Tsinghua University, and I recently took over the DHCP V6 YAM model work. Next, please. And since last meeting, we have made a lot of progress, and the 2 versions have been published. Thanks for Ian and co-chairs for setting up the report on GitHub. And we resolved most issues from Ian, Bernie, and Marcy. Next, please. Here are the structure changes. First, we split the original big model into 5 modules: server, relay, client, options, and types. And we separated configuration data and state data. We also reconstructed the network range definition, and now it only contains address pools, PD pools, and host reservations. The previous reserve addresses and the reserve prefix are merged into host reservations because they same the function of host reservations. And we remodel the DUID definition, and now it contains 4 types defined in 3315 base and a DUID unknown type. Next, please. And here are the detailed changes. We addressed the utilization issue and the use feature to indicate support for each option. And as key others, we moved rapid commit to pool level and removed some unnecessary Boolean nodes, and this will be further discussed in later slide. And we add some interactions with IETF interfaces. Also remodeled most option definitions. Next, please. And now this is what our current model structure is. The server, relay, and client import options and types. Next, please. And here, thanks for Tomic, who discovered the data tracker feature by which we can view the tree model interactively. Next, please.
Yeah, this, if nobody's used this, it's kind of nice. It's a good way to explore the model because you can click on these and then you keep going down. You can drill and expand the model, and it shows you all the relationships and things pretty nicely. I think this is tooling that is being done for all Yang models, so it's really kind of nice.
And here are some outstanding issues we need to further deal with. And the first is the unconventional DUID issue. Should we just treat DUID as opaque values or add a new DUID unknown type as we currently does? Any comments? Okay, personally, I prefer that we add a new DUID unknown type. And next, in this point, we don't make consensus. I think PD function and inherit option set are unnecessary. But Ian, do you have some ideas?
Yeah, Ian Farrer. So, yeah, this is a comment originally raised by Marcin in a review from probably 18 months or longer ago about does the PD functionality have an enable option in there, whereas the address pools for non-temporaries don't. I'm slightly torn on this because my thinking behind this when I kind of looked at this again was you could have a fully compliant RFC 3315 implementation that doesn't do PD. Right,
but is that a problem? I mean, the model doesn't require, I don't think you're required to have every part of the model implemented, right?
Well, so I mean, the concept here would be that if you didn't implement parts of the model that are in the standardized model, then you'd need to do, I forget what the Yang term is for it, but there's basically a message that you can send to say, I do not implement this subtree.
Right,
so
but I mean,
the-
you can also build a server that doesn't do address assignment, for example.
You could do, yeah. I mean,
So- I mean, I think there's
when
a
I started-
question of, I don't know, and this may be a Yang model thing that we have to do, but maybe there's a question of, do we need some sort of capabilities, where you
Well,
can sort of
so-
say, here are my capabilities.
So
right?
Yang does this. I mean, this is part of it. When the session is established, then there will be this capabilities exchange. But the capabilities exchange assumes if you say you support this model, you support everything that's in this model. The features function in there is the way that you can get the variance from that. So if you say, it's perfectly, this part is optional, you can still be perfectly compliant in your implementation, but not do that, then that's why the features function is in there. And it's why we moved to doing that with the options modeling of saying, there's 150 options in there. There's probably only 20 of those that you have to actually do in order to say I'm 3315 compliant or whatever the number is, but it's just quite a subset of that. So we went down the road of saying, well, if you don't implement some of the later ones, well, you can turn that off with IF feature, still be a compliant DHCP server, still be compliant to the Yang model, and we don't have to worry about any of those things. So the thinking extends beyond that to say, well, if it's done with prefix delegation, again, you could be a 3315 server and not do PD. So maybe it makes sense to move that to being a feature function. Maybe we could also make this argument about address pools if you were doing purely stateless DHCP in that case. There's no reason why we can't do that. I think, looking at it in that way, maybe more extensive use of features is the way to solve this.
That's what I would do. I think just having PD and not is not enough, right? Because
yeah, it's fair comment.
It's all optional, right?
Yeah, but it seems to me that features is the right way to do this.
And so whatever the right Yang modeling for that is what we probably should do.
Yeah, so the only other thing that I thought about around this is whether you would want to have the situation where you had pre-config in place. I've built all of my pools here, but I don't yet want to turn this on for whatever reason. But I'm not sure whether in the Yang world that's actually necessary. I mean, it's commonly done with routers, for example, pre-deployment of configuration. So when someone plugs in a new interface, for example, it pops up and starts working. Yeah. I'm not sure if there's a DHCP equivalent to that, though.
Yeah, and I think, we have to get sort of the sort of basic model done before we can worry about some of those more complicated.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I think we are getting more towards this, ironing out the wrinkles in there and the things that, we actually experience. It looks, from the testing that's been done so far, at least the core of the model it seems to be solid, which is, got to be the first step.
Okay, thanks. Next. Sorry. And the relocation of DUID and the rapid commit issue. Currently, for server and client, DUID is defined in server attributes and the client attributes. But actually, DUID is exchanged between server and the client in options. Should we just move that to option?
Lin Hui from the Tsinghua University. As for the location of the DUID and rapid commit, I would prefer to put all of them into the options module because we just have an split option module. Why we need to put them under another container? It's a little bit confusing for me. So personally, I would prefer to put all these things in the standard option module. You have just defined as another YAM module.
The reason why to treat rapid commit option is that it's not a simple option that is being sent back by the server. It affects how the server operates. So in my opinion, the best place for this would be the network range or subnet. So because this is more like a property of the network that is running the server. When you use rapid commit, you say that I am the only server. There is no other server. You don't need to wait for them. So we can just cut the whole advertisement phase and just skip to the assignment.
Could we just to use this option in the network ranges if we just want to, or because we have a hierarchy level, we could just put in different level to indicate if it's globally, it's just what you done here as a server attributes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's kind of like, I kind of, a word we use is sort of policy, right? This is whether you will support rapid commit or not, or whether you want to send a set of options is kind of a policy type of thing. And so we, in our server, we kind of have a policy container that has all of the stuff about, how we should behave for this set of clients, pools, server-wide, right? We have policies that contain options, that contain rapid commit, yes, no, even things about whether you need the client to support reconfigure, or is it optional, or don't you want to support reconfigure? Lifetimes, all that kind of stuff is in sort of a policy container for us. And you can put these policy containers everywhere, and that's what I kind of view, the option holders here are kind of like those policy containers. And so I think you should think about that model of sort of having these containers where, maybe, I don't know whether they should be called policies or not, but that hold this kind of stuff. The server, the DUID for the server, I think should be a server attribute, because that, I don't think there's a model that says, there's nothing that prohibits saying use this server DUID on this network segment, this other one there, but I don't know what benefit that would ever have. And so I think that should be that should be a property of the server as it is a property of the client, right?
Well, and the further question, whether will there be any other options that should be used as the server attributes?
Yeah, I have to go back and look at the model to see where you do certain things and how they're done. I think, again, that they should be sort of in this option bucket, because you should be able to say, for this client, I want you to use this option bucket. For this class of clients, however you want to define that class, I want you to use a set of options. For this pool, that set. Or as a default for the server wide, here's the option, here's the options that I want you to send, right?
Thank you.
Okay. So what about the rapid commit? Should this be contained in option or
In my mind, it should be contained in things, whatever container we use to hold, whether options is the right word or not, I can't say right off. I don't remember the model that intimately, but it should be at the same sort of level where you can define the set of options that are supposed to be sent.
Okay, thanks. Next, please.
That's just my position.
Okay. And this is the most confusing issue to me. And how to define the logic for the server to serve clients' requests from correct address or prefix pool? I'm not sure whether we should do this, because it seems that different implementations, it varies greatly with implementations, and currently we add a client class under address and PD pool, but maybe the client classification mechanism is too complicated. Any comments?
So it's not really that complicated. It's just different in every implementation because it's not part of the specification. So you can consider just removing it completely from the standards model, and then each implementation could provide extension that matches that specific set of features that the implementation has.
Ian Farrer. We haven't tried yet, I think it would be fair to say. I agree that it's going to be a complicated thing from a modeling perspective, and there's nothing really that is springing to mind as to, this is a potential solution that we can try. I can't believe that there is that much variance in what are the things that we're making selections from. It's a source subnet, it's an interface that the relay originates from, it's a relay identifier, it's a kind of client identifier. There is a limited number of things that can be done here.
No, because this is Bernieville's. For our server, you can actually, you can actually write an expression that can munge a whole bunch of data together to produce something. And it can use conditional logic, It says, if the relay is this and this option is that. So it's very complicated. And also for the client class in this pool is kind of too simplified because we use a level of indirection. We do have the concept of a client class, but for pool selection, it's not what client class you have, it's actually what selection tag you have. So a client class can have selection tags and a pool has selection tags, and those things, if a client can only use a pool if it has the same set of selection tags as the pool does.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think that, there's a lot of commonality here that I'm sure your implementation can do many more things, and there's no reason why you couldn't create models that will augment with specific functionality that doesn't exist elsewhere. But if we can get the things that will work for 90% of people, then it's worth the effort. And I don't think I don't know how to do it at the moment, but I'm sure it is possible. And so if we look at it from that perspective, I think we can do something worthwhile there.
Yeah, so I suppose if you keep the description generic enough, you could do it. Probably every implementation that does this has a concept of class name and some sort of class quantifier or expression. But there might be a lot of additional features that are very specific to the server. But still, if you provide this in a model as a put any kind of string here, it's gonna work.
Yeah, maybe that's the comment is that, maybe there's more like you can have some sort of, pool selector or something like that, right? And I don't know whether then you could have in the client classes, you could have what pool selector to use, right? And if you use the same name, then it should work, right? So there might be some level of indirection or the possibility to do indirection that might be useful. I don't know. That's just thinking off the top of my head. So I think it's still an open thing that we have to debate a little bit about how to do those things.
Yeah, I think so. Next, please. Next, we will continue to work on issues on GitHub and notice that Tomic has just posted some issues from the hexagon. Thank you. And we will further check the correctness and the completeness of the option definitions. This is easy, but it consumes a lot of time. And we also need some input from the vendors. Okay, any other comments or suggestions?
In Farrow again. I found a very useful exercise was taking some real config that we have in that we're using at the moment and trying to push that into an XML rendering of the model as it stands at the moment. So I generated a skeleton using one of the Piang tools and basically did a mapping into there, and it very, very quickly showed out there's some glaring holes in there of things that are missing at the moment. So I think it's a worthwhile exercise there to look at config examples from as many implementations as we possibly can do a similar kind of exercise there. And I think that from that there's a lot that can be learned about how well it works, what is possible, what's missing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there's also a next step. I happen to get the XML file with the configuration and then try to actually load it into the configuration, and there was a bunch of other issues. So I reported a couple of them in the issue tracker. I just want to briefly mention two of them. So the first one is that by default, the server didn't support any options. So if I wanted to specify those options, they were rejected by the model because the features were not enabled. This is not how DHCP servers operate. So by default, the server can serve any option that is configured. There is no extra switch that you need to turn to define those options. So if this is a requirement from the Yang perspective, maybe it could be, but it was just very annoying that even the basic things like specifying DNS server, I needed to turn the functionality on first and then enable the option itself.
Right. So, I mean, the process that I followed there is the Piang tool has one of the output formats is an XML skeleton, which it'll just go through. It will pull in the model, and it will generate an XML-based template that you can potentially go and fill in. In the current version of Piang, that is just completely broken. So I had to drop back to an earlier version in order to even get that thing to work. What it seems in there is it doesn't come out with any of it doesn't build a skeleton that has everything that's in there. And if certain features that are mandatory true in the model didn't make it over into there, and so there was a lot of hand cranking that needed to be done to get that thing to there. The other thing I was unable to do is find any way of validating the XML that I had created as being against the Yang model to say, is this actually, and so yeah, I mean, any bugs that were in there were probably as a result of problems in the tooling and problems in the fact that I had to hand crank it. I need to speak to the Piang authors. I think they're around this week, and kind of make some, ask them about it.
Okay, cool. So, and my second comment is that the feature that is, in my opinion, missing in the model is the ability to configure the storage for the server. So every server has to store the information, like leases, reservations, and other things. So the implementation I'm involved in, Kia, it's pretty flexible in this regard. So you can point to whether you want to store them in local file, in a database, or similar places with, the credentials for the database and so on. I presume every implementation has something similar. So it would be useful to have a generic mechanism for this.
Is that something we think we can just tackle using a URI type field? Would that be flexible enough for what it's possible for you to do?
Yeah, possibly. So the most complicated scenario is that you have a database, so you need to specify the type, username, password, hostname, port, and database name. So you could probably abstract this as URL. So I mean, yeah.
If that's the case, then it would be trivial to add that.
Yeah. That should work.
Okay,
All right.
that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
So she's out for a good time. Okay, hello everyone. I'm Tomek Mrugalski. I'd like to introduce a new draft that's been published recently, like 2 weeks ago. So Bernie, go on. So first, some background. So the idea behind this draft is to be able to configure MAC address over DHCPv6. So the first impression that people get is, what? So bear with me, it will make sense in a minute. So a couple of background informations. There's RFC 17241. It defines cooperation between IEEE 802 and IETF. There are recurring meetings, and there is some cooperation between those two entities. So the norm IEEE 802.c splits the local MAC addresses into 4 quadrants, and one of those quadrants is dedicated to local MAC address assignment. There's a working group, 802CQ, that is working on different allocation mechanisms. So a couple people that are very respected and experienced, they thought about this, and they came to a conclusion that DHCPv6 might actually be a useful mechanism used as a delivery for this. So this is how they reached to Bernie. Bernie talked with me, and we scratched our heads a little bit and said, okay, yeah, this could be done. So there's a very useful presentation done by Pat Taylor. It explains a lot of the reasons. Go on. So, but I still wasn't convinced. So I tried to convince myself. So what's the problem? Basically, this is about a Birthday paradox. So if you are not familiar with the problem, is that right now in this room, there's 31 people. So there's more than 55% chance that 2 people have birthday on the same day. So, but it's all nice. But if we're talking about things like virtual machines, and you want to create lots of them, there's the problem that If you randomly assign MAC addresses, there could be conflicts. Not very frequently, but sometimes. So if you have a large scale, it will affect you. But the scale is not that big to be affected by this. So for example, if you use a classic approach, for example, in VirtualBox, when you create a new machine, only the last 24 bits are randomized. So if you have 1,000 VMs, the probability of a collision is 3%. So this is not trivial, and this is starting to go up. So to reach 50%, you only need less than 5,000 VMs. So, and this is significant. So you could try to go further. So use almost the whole MAC address space. There are 2 bits that are reserved. The first one determines whether this is a unicast or multicast address, so it has to be unicast, whether this is global or local, so this is also determined. And if you obey the quadrants that are defined by IEEE, you get 45 or 44 bits. So that with large deployment, it gives you a probability of 1.41 of collision. So, but this is a problem because this is a probability for every additional VM that you spin up. So you will get a lot of collisions. So that's why there is a need for a central repository that will assign the addresses. Okay. So what are the use cases? So the first most common, in my opinion, use case will be a hypervisor that is allocating MAC addresses for virtual machine. They might have, depending on the use cases and the business models, they might be very long-lived or very short-lived and be recycled frequently. So the other use case is the IoT devices. There's a lot of new type of devices like sensors. Some of them are disposable that are very short-lived, and they are consuming the MAC address space very quickly. So okay, go on. So the other question is why this should be DHCP-v6 based. So the quick answer is that there's existing infrastructure. We have the protocol that is extensible. We have the support in networks. We have relays deployed that could already deliver the traffic and do some things. There are tools that are built around DHCP, and administrators are familiar with this. So this should be easier to deploy than completely new protocol. And finally, we are the DHCP guys. So when you ask us, the answer is always DHCP. So yeah. Okay. Anyway, so this is what we came up with. So we tried to make it as similar to other mechanisms that we have. So there's the container option. It looks exactly the same as containers for addresses and prefixes. So there's nothing new in this except the option name. Okay. This is slightly different. The option is LL address option. So it is used to convey what we call a block of addresses. So it's flexible enough that you can request and get a single address, but if you want to, you can get more of them in a single option. So the link layer address type is just a type, whether this is Ethernet or something else. Link layer LAN, this is almost always 6 bytes, but there are some exotic architectures like InfiniBand. They are using 20 bytes, and I think WiMAX is, in some cases, are using 8 bytes long. But anyway, there's an address that you can specify, and then the number of additional addresses that are adjacent to it. So if you want to just get a single address, extra addresses is 0. That's it. There is no preferred lifetime, just valid lifetime. Okay, so the operation is basically the same as you would expect from normal DHCP operation, just the options are slightly different. So it's simpler than the normal address assignment because there is no confirm, there is no decline. We think that we don't need to reconfigure and information request is not used. So go on. So just to explain briefly how it works in the use cases that I mentioned. So for the hypervisor, there's a hypervisor that is managing the VMs. So it asks the server to get an address or more likely a block of addresses on behalf of the VMs. And of course the hypervisor doesn't use them on its own, just creates the VMs with those addresses. And for the actual clients like IoT devices, there's the bootstrap problem. To send DHCP packets, you need to have MAC address. So you could start with a randomized address and either ask the server to assign address or ask the server whether this MAC address is okay or not. And then this would be sort of like a registration mechanism. So, and that's pretty much it. There is one more slide. So we have some questions whether we should use rapid commit or not. Couple approaches are possible that it's forbidden, it can be allowed, or if we want to speed up the process, we can even make it mandatory. We are not sure whether to use reconfigure or not. And what to do, what the hypervisor is supposed to do if the server becomes unavailable, it tries to renew and finally the addresses expire. So just to wrap this up, we have a repository on GitHub with issues, so there's a bunch of them. But before we go into discussions about them, Bernie, next slide, please. So I have a question to the working group. Is this something that you are interested in? Are you willing to participate in this work? So any comments? Tomatoes?
Suresh Krishnan, 80 hat off. Like, I'm personally interested in this work progressing. Like I kind of told you this before, and I think it's worthwhile doing this work.
And 80 hat on, you would support our taking the work on if the working group agreed to adopt it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Like it's something that's kind of in the charter. The charter is like a bit wide. Like we didn't have that many milestones. And so if you want to take it on, like it's just like, you know, put in a milestone and I'll approve it. So I don't think we need to reach out for that.
Okay.
Any other comments from anybody as to, you know, is this something you think the working group should consider doing? Do you think it's a bad idea?
Is it on? Okay. Tim Winters, UNHI. Well, I think this is an interesting idea. I think this is something the working group should take on.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
All right. So I think that is it for us today. 6 minutes early. Thank you. And I think we'll take the question to the working group as to whether there's, we may not do an adoption call right away, but we probably will do one sometime. Maybe once we, there's a few cleanups we have to do and questions to answer. And we'll probably send out a few queries to the mailing list as well to get some feedback. If anybody else is interested in being co-author or whatever, let us know too. All right, thank you. And where's the blue sheets? If you didn't sign, please do so. Hello. It's very quiet, isn't it? Compared to what it used to be.
Exactly at night time.
Yeah. Well, see, we don't have like